Okay, we're going to spend just a little bit of time talking about Illustrator, which in my opinion is one of the greatest programs out there. Super fun. Of course, it's one of the only ones that I've ever used, so I could be totally way off. It's a vector building program, and it's all about shapes. So let's go ahead and dive in. When you get to the home screen, when you open it up, you're going to have an option to open from from wherever on your computer, or create a new file. We're going to create a new file, and I am going to, for this one, just choose 10 inches by 10 inches. You can kind of do whatever you want. You can decide whether or not it's inches or pixels or points, picas, feet and inches, yards. You're getting really big in that realm. Inches is just kind of nice because you have a good idea of exactly how it's going to be, especially when making stickers and such. So I'll click create, and we get this. I'm going to go ahead and expand this open just so that you can see it a little bit better. Now, by default, I already have this all customized over here, and you can see that these are all just thumbnails that indicate the different options that I like to use. Over on the left-hand side is your toolbar, and there are a variety of tools that we're going to go over and use. And then, of course, this white space in the center is your artboard. And we are going to just get used to using this program because it's a pretty powerful program, kind of industry standard for using or for creating graphics. Up at the top, you'll see the different app options, right? So if you click on File, Edit, Object, those will allow you to do different actions and options within Illustrator. So two tools that I'd like to talk about, because you're really going to need to know how to use the shape tool, and then you're also going to need to know how to use the selection tools. And those are tools that you're just going to be using all the time. So let's go ahead and check them out. On the left-hand side, the shape tools, if you click and hold, will bring up the different shapes that are there. So you've got rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star, line, segment, and those are the options that you have. So let's just go ahead and choose the rectangle. I'm going to click and drag across my artboard, and you'll notice that I can just kind of go any rectangle that I want. If I press and hold shift instead, it's going to constrain that to a square. Okay, then I'll let go of that. You'll notice that that shape tool is still selected over here, the rectangle, and I could draw more if I wanted to. However, what if I want to edit this particular shape? I've got two different options in regards to selection tools. I've got the selection tool and then the direct selection tool. And each of those have a specific purpose and uses. So I'm going to choose the selection tool. Now with the selection tool, I can manipulate the size of this shape, and you'll see the bounding box. So I can, reposition it. If I hover outside of the corner, I'm able to rotate. If I'm pressing shift, it does it in increments. Okay. If I use this direct selection tool and click on one of those anchor points, now I can manipulate just that anchor point. Okay. And I can do that for every anchor point or path in between. Right, so if I click on that with the direct selection tool, those are some of the options that you'll see. I can select a couple of different anchor points at once, and if I drag those around, you'll see that it's editing just those two anchor points. If I want to round the corners, there's a little circle on the inside of the corner that allows me to create rounded shapes as well. All right. With the selection tool, I am able to change the color of the shape that I'm using, the stroke along the outside. It's really useful for changing those object properties. And when you have an object selected, then you're going to be able to manipulate that object. So the way that I have mine set up is I've got swatches and those sorts of things on all ready to go, so I can just jump in and choose a different color as needed. By default, what you're going to see is the original workspace. So see, I've customized mine, but what we're going to do is go to Essentials. And this workspace is going to look just a little bit different. And you can see that there are properties, layers, libraries. You can expand and contract those as you like. But with this one selected, I can change the color of that fill. So in this little box down here, that square is going to determine the fill color. And this outline square is going to determine the stroke color. So whichever one is selected is the one that you're going to be able to edit. So I'm just going to select the fill, and if I want to expand that out, I'll have a little bit more option as far as colors that I can go. I can just do this color picker, right, and choose whatever color I want. And then if I want to change the color of the stroke, I'll click on the stroke, and I can do the same thing. Now, you can also change the thickness of the stroke, the weight of the stroke. If you go over on your properties panel, you can click on the drop down and you can instantly choose a different size. If you click on the word stroke, then you're going to be able to operate or to edit and manipulate different parts of that stroke. So for instance, this corner, you'll notice it's a miter join. When I click on round join, now those sharp areas, those sharp arrows go away. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so that you can see that in action. Incidentally, to zoom in, if you press and hold Option and scroll on your mouse, you'll be able to zoom in really quick. So I'll open up the stroke again and choose miter, and now it's a sharp area, right? I can align the stroke to the path, right? So it's the same on either side. I can do it on the inside. Zoom out a little bit so that you can see that. All right. Whoa, too far, too far. Or I can do it to the outside. Right? By default, it's just going to go to the inside. And of course, you can scrub up and down on the ball to make that stroke bigger as needed. So that in a nutshell is how you use the selection tools and change some of the properties of those individual objects that you have that you're working with. So those objects usually take the form of a shape, right? But it's a path and a fill. Sorry, it's a path that could have a stroke on it, which is that line on the outside, and it could have a fill or no fill, depending on what its purpose is. So getting to know how to use the strokes and fills, is going to be super useful for you just to, determine on what kind of effect you end up with on your work. The next thing I want to talk about is how to offset a path. So sometimes you can take a path and put an offset on it, and it's going to do it perfectly around the outside. That's going to be useful when you're setting up stickers to do like a contour cut around the outside edge. It's also going to be useful for just a variety of different effects on the work that you do. So let me show you how I do that. If I select with my selection tool that object, and I go up to Object, scroll down to Path, some options come up. I want to offset the path. When I click on that, I get a little preview of it if this check mark is on preview. If it's not, I won't see it. So make sure that you select preview. And then you can scroll up and down depending on where you want that offset to go. So that's a pretty useful tool. I'm just going to click OK. And that, is a different object than the one that I just drew. So I can change the different properties, if I wanted a different fill color, that front one, and different outside edge, I could do that just really easily. So offsetting it is going to be really useful for I don't know, lots of different effects, because sometimes you want that perfectly scaled up version of the shape that you're doing. All right. So now the next thing that I want to show you is alignment. Alignment is when you take the objects and you align them on your artboard based on either other elements within your design or the artboard itself. So in this case, I've got two different shapes and I want to align them together. And this is how I would do that. I would click and drag across both so that I have both of them selected. And this align option opens up. I could align it to the selection. If I click on this, I could align it to a key object, or I could align it to the artboard. For this one, I just want to get both of those centered directly in the artboard. So I choose artboard. Now, this top row is alignment. If I click on these three dots, there are more options and they pop up. So I could distribute them, or I could align them, and I can do some other options if I really get technical with the distribution. But for today, I just want to talk a little bit about alignment and distribution. So I want to align these to the artboard. So I'll click on this to go center, and then I'll click this to go center vertically. And now they're both perfectly in the center. Okay. Now what's happened is these shapes are just a little bit off, and so the way that these are getting centered on the board is just a little bit different. Um, However, if I had, a couple of circles, for instance, I'm just going to go ahead and make this so it makes sense. So if I have maybe a square, and then if I have a circle, and let's just go ahead and change properties of that just so you can see them differently. And I want to make those the same in the center. I select both of those and it's aligned to the artboard. So I click in the center horizontally and vertically. So now those are both aligned to the artboard, right? Sometimes you might want to distribute them. So let's just say I've made a star and we'll change the color to that just so, it doesn't get too confusing. And I want to distribute these three shapes vertically in the center with even spacing. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to align these to the center of the artboard. So I choose Align to Artboard and I click Center. Okay, but I want to have these distributed equally, so equal spacing in between. So what I'm going to do here is choose Selection, and then I'm going to do a vertical distribution. When I click on that, okay, now these are based on the center of those objects, not the space in between. So that's where it gets a little bit confusing. If I want to have the exact same space in between, what I'm going to do is have those objects selected, and I'm going to then again click on an object, and that's going to create a key object. So I'm going to base it on this center square. I click on that, and you'll notice that that darker, thicker line appears around it. And you'll see that a key icon appears in the alignment panel. And now what I want to do is to put a little bit of even spacing in between. So I do this, and then I click vertical distribute, and now there's an equal space in between those. Now, these might not be perfectly centered as far as being directly in the center of this artboard, and that's what I'm going to take care of now. So in order to get these centered exactly, I'm going to need to group these three objects together. Because if I don't, and I click on the alignment horizontally and vertically based on the artboard, they're all just going to go directly to the center of the artboard and be overlapped. However, I want this arrangement to be centered. So I'll right click. I'm going to group. Then I'm going to come over to align and I'll go horizontal and vertical based on the artboard. So that's very quick introduction to alignment, and I hope that helps. I wonder how long I've been talking. I've been talking for a while. That's all right. So we're gonna just talk a little bit more about some of the things that you can do with the shapes. So sometimes you want to create your own shapes by making shapes and then merging them together. You have a lot of different options for what you can do with shapes when they overlap to create your own interesting objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these three shapes and I'm going to arrange them. Well, yes, I want it to be aligned, right? But I want them to be aligned to the artboard, just for this example. So I'll center them there. Um, and what I want to do is make this a circle shape on the bottom, square in the middle, star on the top, but I want them to all merge together. So what I do is I select all of those objects and I come over to this Pathfinder. Pathfinder tool is really useful for creating new objects. Shapes from shapes, you can pull shapes out of shapes, you can have the overlaps become new shapes. There's a lot of fun things that you can do with it. And really, it's just going to take time for you to play around with it. But if I click on this Unite, now this is all one shape, right? So I've taken those three shapes and now I've made it one shape. So if I undo that, I'll show you some of the other ones. This one is one that's useful, collecting or click to minus the front. So you're going to create a compound shape. Compound shape is basically two paths. Right now I have a shape on top of a shape. So remember, this is they're kind of stacked. But what if I want to just cut this hole out of this square? Well, I'll select both of those. I'll come over and I'll just punch it out using minus front. Boom, there it is. So now I have an interesting shape and I could put this star in the middle and arrange it in interesting ways. Let's go ahead and just center it and center it. There you go. And so there's just too much really to explain without you kind of going through and just trying it. For starting out, I would just suggest sticking to these first two options. So unite and minus the front. Because once you have those down, then you can start getting more and more complex, right? So don't try to do everything. Don't try to learn everything right from the get-go. Just do little baby steps. And this is going to come and make more sense. If you've had a little bit of experience with Illustrator, that should come right back. If you've had zero experience with Illustrator, it's going to take a little bit more, but just play around with it and see what you can come up with. And then, of course, just ask questions of your peers and me so that we can figure those problems out, because it's a really fun program and it's great for building the shapes, especially for this particular assignment that we're working on.